looking at all these the city halls in the area, there's nobody that no other city hall has the presence from a distance of the Belleville City Hall, because that tower sticks way up there, and it's looming way up there, higher than anything else, and it's magnificent. It's beautiful. It's always identified as the heart of the downtown of Belleville and the surrounding area.
The 1850s and 60s represented a time when there was a lot of growing optimism here. Well, this building was built as a market building, and we'd had a market building at the east end of Market Square, and there had been a small structure built there which was later used for other purposes. They wanted some place where they could hang a bell up high enough that it could be heard to all parts of town. And that was one reason. They wanted a bell tower, and they wanted a clock that could be seen from the East Hill, from the West Hill, and also from the downtown.
And all of this is founded on the amazing vision of people of the community way back in 1871 to 1873, when they conceived of this building, this beautiful building.
The vision of this and the location was just fantastic. When you look at it, and I think at the day it wasn't an easy thought-out process. I believe that some of it was, they had to borrow money, and it was a tough decision for them to do.
They had this gung-ho vision of the future of Belleville, and this was a very aggressive project to take on back then with a small, basically quite a small community. And we are all so beholden to the people way back in that time for having that vision. And it really helps you to look back and see all of that, and then feel that you really have we have a responsibility to carry on similar visions with the same enthusiasm and positive outlook.
It's about vision, and when you look at this building, it is the landmark building in the city amongst some of the churches, and it's glad that it's been preserved.
We realized that we were jammed to the rafters. People were sitting on top of each other, and we were proud of our city hall, but it has to be practical, and we just didn't have enough room, and people were complaining, and on and on and on. So we had to do something.
I believe that consultants they'd made several proposals. There had been a proposal to divide the main upper floor space into a couple of levels. There had been a proposal to put an addition on the back of the building, which did not go over well with the public, to treat this beautiful classical building with a modern addition on the back.
There was no more room in City Hall, absolutely none. There was nothing we could do. We had tried everything.
I could see that there was just magnificent potential here, and it was just one of those odd things that I met the mayor at the time, George Zagoras, outside the City Hall on a Friday afternoon, and I just mentioned to him that I'd love to have a look in the City Hall. I had some ideas. I'd like to check them out, and I just on impulse, he handed me his keys and said, "Go in on the weekend and have a look." So the next Saturday, I came in, and I got way up the tower and into the roof space, and had a look around, and it was just the more I saw, the more I got blown away by the potential of the building to do something quite spectacular.
I remember him coming back. We had a small little committee that was looking at this, and George Zagoras, of course, was mayor, and he was the one in charge, and he came back and said, I think there's potential to do all this in City Hall. And at that point, it was kind of like, oh, goodness, Bill. that we've already looked. There is no more space. We need a huge amount. Plus, it's not as though we just want enough space to get us through the next couple of years. We want to do something for the next whatever. And Bill insisted that he thought of a way of doing it. And so, you know, honestly, almost reluctantly, we said, well, all right, do a little work on this and get back to us. And that was when he started going to work. And for a brief period of time, we said, you know something? Maybe City Hall needs to be somewhere else. Maybe the building that we know as City Hall will have to morph into some other use, you know, meetings, et cetera, and we will go somewhere else and build a brand new City Hall somewhere else in our city. And that was certainly being seriously considered at one point.
I do believe that there was a firm once that actually proposed leveling the building and starting again. So it had had several suggestions made for doing something to create more space, but it was just kind of stuck going nowhere because none of them had been acceptable to the public or to council.
In the midst of all this, Bill White crawled around City Hall seeing what was in there, sort of unbeknownst to us. Maybe we knew he was going to do it, but I don't think we paid much attention to him, to be honest with you.
There was a spot in the floor that, well, there was a hole, and for some reason there was a little ladder that went down part way. So I went down the ladder, and I could see that there was, a long time ago, there had been like a huge ballroom type assembly room space in here. All these rich moldings around the perimeter. But it was all lost because down a little bit further were suspended ceilings that had been put in to carve the second floor of the City Hall up into smaller spaces. I just couldn't wait to get a tape measure and find a way to measure for the clearance down to the floor. And when I did that and saw that there was, man, there's enough space in here that we could divide this into 2 levels. We could get 2 floors in here, I'm quite sure. And then looking at the roof space, they had these, there were these beautiful, magnificent, 12-foot deep, beautiful wooden trusses that went from one side of the building to the other, which was about 72 feet. And I thought, geez, if there was just some way of reconfiguring this ceiling space, this roof space, into usable floor space, it would be, man, you could really do something, you know, with this. And really, I didn't have to look at it that long as as a structural engineer to see how I could do that. And well, fortunately, I was also an architect, and then I could envision how you could use this space once we had reconfigured it. And boy, this is really this is an incredible, dramatic opportunity. One of the steps in this process was to go around and look at other city halls in the area. This took a lot of time, but it was also valuable for perspective. And I mean, quite frankly, the more I looked, the more that I could see that Belleville had this magnificent opportunity. So in order to correlate all this information and bring it together in a way that could be understood, I developed what was called the Civic Center equation. And when I applied that equation to Belleville, man, Belleville was hitting a home run. And I tried to show that in the report. So I was just extremely passionate about not missing this opportunity. So the best way to do that was to try and have a foolproof presentation. First of all, to convince myself, and then to convince all decision makers.
We were not sold on it for a long time. First of all, we thought it was impractical. Secondly, we didn't think he could find the space. I mean, he took us kind of on a mini tour, and I mean, it was awful up here. It was rafters and dirty, and I certainly couldn't see it, and I don't think many in the committee could see it. And but bit by bit, he kind of sold us. And you know, I know Bill's an architect and an engineer, and I know that he feels that's how this happened. But it happened because he was so persistent, and he fell in love with the idea, and he loved this building. And he was a great salesperson, and he convinced us that this was the way to go.
The thing that maybe they had to have the biggest trust in was the numbers that I had worked out that was my estimated cost of doing the work. They certainly had to trust me on that. And I look back at those numbers now, and then I look at the cost of things today, and it just floors me. I can't believe we actually did all that work for for that amount of money.
When you look at it now, it looks pretty obvious. I don't know, anybody would have done it, but it didn't look obvious at the time. It looked impossible at the time. And Bill White and George Zaguris as well. I give George credit. George was the mayor at the time, and he and Bill had lots of meetings to try and figure this out. There were all kinds of obstacles to this. It did not work smoothly, but bit by bit, he kind of lured us in and convinced us that this was the way to go.
I thought, well, I'm going to have to build a model of this thing, and it was a large model, and it was a lot of work, and it really helped. The model was put together for different reasons. It was, for one thing, it was for me to study myself on how to alter the building, structurally, because it was very tricky. It was when we undertook the construction, it was not easy to reconfigure a structure to that degree and still, hold the roof up and have everything in place, and do drastic things like, bring new stairwells and elevator shafts and everything up through the existing structure where they really didn't want to fit, and it was very tricky. We were able to take the loads off the trusses in such a way that a lot of the members in the trusses we could reconfigure and create usable space in an attic space where it just wasn't there before.
Honestly, to me, I don't have a whole lot of vision when it comes to this stuff. I kind of went, oh God, I hope this works, because it didn't look like it was going to work. It was a mess in here. And it was hard for me to visualize how it was all going to come together. And, bit by bit, week by week, you started, to see it come together. And, towards the end, it was exciting, because then it was kind of like, wow, he did it. This is going to be really, really nice.
It all went extremely well. And I look back and I'm absolutely amazed that something as tricky as this went so well. It's just great. One very basic thing was to look and once it all gutted, it was to confirm what appeared to be the case, and that was that the building was really well built. It was solid. You could say that, relatively speaking, it had good bones. The trusses were magnificent. Big timbers from white pine and so on, that probably from the area at the time. This is the kind of carpentry work that you would see in shipbuilding. The quality of construction carried right through in all respects, right to the top of the tower.
The environment is beautiful, a lot of light. Bill was very big on getting as much light as he could inside the building, and I think he did a great job in that with the big center area and all that kind of stuff.
Light being so important to the human psyche, and to have the building just full of all this natural light, it's so inspirational. One of the fundamental things that encouraged us to do that is that the way that I'd restructured the roof enabled light a lot of light to come down through a central atrium, and it made the interior spaces really quite inspirational. All this natural light. It was just an inspirational, place to be.
And George was very practical. George wasn't, going to be spending money on foolish flourishes. That was not his style. He wanted George would want the building to look nice, but his number one thought would be practicality. It has to work, it has to function, it has to be useful, and it has to have enough room that we can plan for the future. It was quite a change, and again, we had a big debate over that. I remember the debate was, well, we've been on the second floor, we are more accessible. If you move us up to the fourth floor, we are less accessible, and so there'll be a disconnect between the people that work at City Hall, or at least the mayor and council up on the fourth floor, and the community. And Oh, I don't know. We argued about that for a while too, but it's turned out very well. I mean,
Best kept secrets, I guess, when they found the extra space here to do council.
So to put the council chambers in the in this top floor, in the reworked truss spaces, in the end, sort of won out and seemed to be the most sensible thing to do.
A lot of colorful stories out of here that you hear about. Probably half of them are maybe folklore, and the other half a bit to the truth. But I think that overall, the history in this building, it just speaks volumes of how our city's gone, and it's important to keep that history.
The chair is really the only piece of furniture, significant furniture, that is used from the old one.
Was the mayor's chair, which is a beautiful piece of furniture, is tall. It's got, I don't know how tall it is, but it's 13 or 14 feet because of the backing on it, and it wouldn't fit. There was no way it was going to fit in the existing envelope. And so we're talking about, well, you know, you could cut it in half, which would have been awful to cut that beautiful piece of furniture in half. So it was kind of a stupid idea, but we didn't know what to do.
And so what we did in the end was to create another long skylight right directly over the council chambers so that the mayor's chair could fit in there, and which brought even more light into the building.
It was a little chaotic while they were doing the renovations because, of course, you know, the renovations were enormous, and so we had to move out. So we moved into King George Square, the King George, the old school. That didn't work out all that well, you know, but you know, there's nothing we could do about it because the reality was this building was a construction site. We couldn't work here. We couldn't have council meetings, and most of the staff had to go up there.
And there was a sign outside, right along North Front Street, which said City Hall. And people had to get used to the fact that it was no longer a school. It had been closed for school purposes, but the city could get it, and did get it, to use for the time that this building, the new City Hall, was being built.
It was very exciting once we could see how this really was going to work, and I'm sure it was exciting when the day came that everybody sort of got to come back in. That was really an amazing day and week.
I think that people were waiting to see what would happen, because the building before that time, with the exception of the council chamber, was not really an attractive site. And it was an impressive occasion. There was a good turnout. You had former councilors, members who had been here. You had a fair number of citizens as well.
It's a very warm building to work in too, you know, and I think maybe that helps with the arguments that go on at City Hall, which always do. If you're in a warm, comfortable building, maybe you're a little more likely to compromise and get things done.
I guess when it hit me would have been when the deputy mayor of Pickering was in this building, and they have a newer City Hall, and you know, he had about an hour when he was waiting for me walking around, and was just amazed at of the history of the building and how it was kept.
This building is so loaded with history and just so beautiful. And now we've brought all of this light into the interior.
The ambience of the new room is much nicer. I mean, the old room was not great, and this new room is beautiful. I mean, it's got the beautiful light coming in, and you know, the old brick, and I really love the fact that they left the brick wherever they could, so that's part of the charm of the old building. You can tell what kind of an old building you're in.
This was just something that just you know, lived constantly with. It was just that important. I feel extremely privileged to have somehow ended up in a position to be able to do this thing and help the community realize its whole potential in this regard. It was just a tremendous honor.
And I can't say enough how important he was to this happening. The project absolutely wouldn't happen without Bill White. He made it happen. No, it's beautiful, and there are very few city halls like that. You know, there are nice city halls all over, of course, but this is pretty special. And most people that come to this community that don't know this community, you look at this and go, "Wow, what a beautiful building."
I think it's great that they saved the building, and this is probably one of the most comfortable city halls that I've been in.
All in all, it was cost effective. And it's beautiful, and the thought that City Hall would have moved out of the downtown, which was certainly up for consideration for a brief period of time would have been horrible. And it's turned out very well.
And you know, I've said this to people on tours, it's your building, it's not my building. I am the mayor, but it's the citizens' building, it's a public building. It's our community building, it's owned by everybody in the community.
When I look back on it, it was kind of unusual. It was, there was an excellent consensus to go ahead with the project, you know, right from the beginning. And I really give, especially Mayor Zagoras, we had a very special relationship after this. It was a tremendous honor for him, for me to have him trust me out on the street that morning the way that he did. But then I felt that, and he felt that he'd been rewarded for that trust as well, that there really was an exciting opportunity here to develop.
In hindsight, it looks like a simple decision, but it wasn't. And he was the mayor, and he was the guy that, you know, if it turns out good, he gets the credit. If it turns out bad, he gets the blame.
This building is very important to our history. It's very important to our community, and it's a building that should be here forever.
Every area where there's a lot of people still needs a center of gravity. It's been like that through, you know, through history. All the great cities that exist in Europe and around the world have a, yeah, most of them benefit by having this great, clear center of gravity.